If you're watching this as a black person, I want you to know that there is nothing under the sun that is new. I want you to know that there is nothing literally these people can actually do that will make you see it like, oh, I never expected it. Expect every single thing. And because a lot of black folks are not freaking out so much when a lot of things actually happen that they think that the black community is going to be turned upside down, it's not giving these people more confusion. Now, explain to me in this video that you're about to watch, what led to this point? Because they're not only looting, they're not only taking, they've not only push in segregation and so on and so forth, giving some certain people privileges, but they want to take every single thing that make the black community happy. And that is why I will still say it. If you're watching this particular video, I don't care how many views this particular video gets. But if you're watching this particular video, have it at the back of your mind that nothing should freak you out. In fact, expect the worst. Expect the worst to happen. I've trained myself to that point. I'm not praying for bad thing. Nobody is praying for bad thing. But when you expect the worst to happen, when you see it, you just maybe probably just cry, laugh about it, and then move on with your life. Because that is one thing they are even scared of. And I want a lot of black people to actually start speaking up. Start talking. Start making your voices heard. Don't limit it to, oh, it's not my job. Let them do their thing. Oh, I'm living where I'm. If it did not hit you today, it might hit you tomorrow. I just want you to have that at the back of your mind. Anyways, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sonia. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. I want to roll out the clips so that you guys can actually see the clips. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Credit belongs to original creators of every clips and stitches we have in our today's episode, and this is just for educational purposes. With that being said, let's dive right into this, and I'll be back with commentaries.
So with the Supreme Court ruling on white supremacy, because that's what this case is about. It's about gerrymandering maps and getting white people more votes. That's exactly what this is. Now, let's take that same mentality. Well, it was designed in a different time. Cool, great. Then let's do the same thing with the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment was written during a different time, a long time ago, when we owned muskets that took 1 minute to reload. That was designed so that white people in Virginia would stop black people from having the freedoms. Oh, you're not okay with that? Oh, see, that's what this is about once again. It goes back to what this is really about. Not about equality, not about changing the laws to update it. It's about maintaining the white male patriarchy. And the Supreme Court itself is completely corrupt. But the bigger issue is the same thing with gerrymandering. That there are people in this country that are going to vote Republicans and say, yeah, it's okay, I'm okay with this. That's the problem. The dumpster fire in the White House, the wannabe fascist, yes, he is a problem. But there is a ton of people that are supporting him, just like Benito Mussolini, just like 1930s Germany, and just like Joseph Stalin. These dictator fascists don't do what they do in a bubble. They are supported by a group of circus clowns. And that's what the Supreme Court is. And that's what the voters are. And that's what the Congress and the Senate are. They're all saying, this is okay, Daddy. Just make America white again. Have a good day.
All right, there's a case that's before the Supreme Court today, Louisiana versus Calais. And it's not really getting the attention that it should be getting. And it is a big deal. So I just want to take a break in my regular things that I normally post right now, because I think I need to talk about this. This case could decide whether Black and brown people have voting rights left in this country. And I know that sounds dramatic, y'all, but it's not, I promise. This is about the last part of the Voting Rights Act that still actually works. So here's what's going on, right? The Voting Rights Act was created back in 1965 to stop states from making it harder for people to vote just based on race. And most of these protections have been stripped over the years. But there's one piece left, and that's Section 2. That's the part that says that states can't draw voting maps or create laws that make it harder for Black and brown people to have their votes count. It's how communities have been fighting back against gerrymandering, which is when politicians redraw maps to keep certain groups out of power, essentially. And Section 2 is the reason that any of those unfair maps get challenged at all. So now Louisiana is in front of the Supreme Court today. saying something incredibly ridiculous, but also very dangerous. They're basically saying that states shouldn't be made to consider race when trying to fix racial discrimination. That makes no sense. Like, how do you fix racism without looking at race? You can't. But that's their argument, and the Supreme Court agreed to hear it. And if the Supreme Court sides with them, Section 2 won't be completely gone. It'll stop working. Because if you can't talk about race, then you can't prove racism. That's the loophole. Back in the 80s, the Supreme Court tried to make this law weaker. They said that you had to prove that racism was intentional. Like you needed someone caught saying, yeah, I did this to stop black people from voting. And that made cases almost impossible to win. So Congress actually stepped in and said if a law ends up hurting black voters, then that's enough. You don't have to prove impact, just intent. That's how Section 2 got stronger again. That's how Black, Native, and Latino communities started winning back fairer representation. But Calais could undo all of that progress. If Louisiana wins this case, there won't be any real federal law to protect voters of color. The part that used to stop states from changing laws without permission, that died in 2013 with Shelby County v. Holder. And this would take away what's left. And we already know what happens when that guardrail disappears. After Shelby, Texas, Alabama, and North Carolina, they all started passing voter ID laws that targeted black and brown people. And in Pasadena, Texas, they redrew maps overnight to weaken Latino power. It's the same pattern every time. They just keep waiting until nobody's looking. So yeah, Louisiana v. Calais isn't on every headline, but it should be. Because this case is not just about one election. It's not just about one instance. This is not just one case. It's about whether our votes, our voices, really, still matter after this election is over. So if they gut Section 2, discrimination in voting won't just get worse. It'll get harder to prove. And when something can't be proven, it can't be stopped. And that's how they win quietly. Not with violence this time, but with paperwork and silence. I'm going to put a handful of legal organizations below that are working to stop this oppression. If you can donate, please do. But if you have a voice, you don't need a platform. If you have a voice, spread the word. More of us need to know about this. Authoritarian systems survive on fatigue. The way you stop them is through repetition, connection, and support for the causes made to protect us. Yeah. Land of the free.
White people have had a 400+ year head start. 400 years worth of generational wealth stolen from our ancestors, Native Americans, ancestors, mind you, stolen. They didn't earn it, took it, and have had a 400+ year head start and generational wealth. And they can't even handle black people having one full generation of bare minimum voting right access, bare minimum. We ain't even nowhere near the same level what y'all got. We just talking about voting rights. My grandmother is almost 80. And in her lifetime, she has literally gone from black people hardly having any voting rights, especially black women, to gaining a semblance of voting rights, to now those voting rights being back on the chopping block in one lifetime span. Grandmother. This is, it is so enraging. It's giving me goosebumps. And white people, I don't want to hear all of my comments. I'm so sorry that y'all are experiencing this. This is so unfortunate. I voted for Kamala. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see a speck of salt in my comments. I'll delete it. I don't want to see y'all right now. I don't care about your condolences. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. I'm sick of y'all. I'm so... Jesus. 400-year head start, and y'all can't even handle... This is just...
Listen to this. Listen to this. This is Justice Jackson talking to the attorney that is arguing for the state. This is what I was talking about in my clip earlier. And she got frustrated talking to him because he's acting like the solutions are the issue, but he's not acknowledging why the solutions are race-based if the problems are race-based. Listen to this.
Justice Jackson.
So where in Section 2 does it mandate another minority district? I mean, my understanding, as I explored with Ms. Nelson, is that Section 2 is the mechanism by which we determine that equal electoral opportunity is not being provided for a certain minority group. And we've interpreted in jingles, we've given some flesh to how one goes about identifying that set of circumstances. But I thought that's the end of it in terms of the court's announcement under Section 2, and the court then turns to the state and says, how do you want to remedy this? We've got a problem. And sometimes the state might draw a second minority district, sometimes it might not. And yet your answer to Justice Barrett was, well, everybody just knows that that's the automatic remedy. So can you help me figure out that disconnect?
Well, Justice Jackson, I think there's a reason why this court's voting precedents, going all the way back to Shaw 1, are so tied up with race. It's because the remedy, as parties and the courts have understood Section 2 to operate, is almost always going to be race-based. That's why
they're so tied up with race because that's the initial problem, right? That's the beginning. The beginning is the claim that a person makes under Section 2 that because of their race, they are not being afforded equal electoral opportunity. It is a separate question as to how we go about remedying that and the extent to which we need to use race as a remedy. That's the question we're here on today, but the Section 2 issue is just what circumstances do we look at to determine whether this problem of unequal electoral opportunity on the basis of race is occurring.
Right, and a couple of responses to that, Justice Jackson.
Wait, so can I just ask you, why is that not a compelling state interest to identify areas in which that problem is occurring?
Your Honor, of course, as this court recognized in SFFA, states can remedy intentional
No, I'm not talking about the remedy. I'm talking about
identify.
All right, so if I'm right, that Section 2 is about identifying the problem and then requiring some remedy, I don't understand why your answer to Justice Kagan's question about is this a compelling state interest is no. The answer is obviously yes, that you have an interest in remedying the effects of racial discrimination that we identify using this tool. Whether you go too far in your remedy is another issue,
Exactly.
right?
Your Honor, I think step zero in all of these cases, it was certainly step zero in the Robinson litigation, is the plaintiffs came in and said, we want another majority black district.
I thought they came in and said, we are not receiving equal electoral opportunity because our votes are being diluted.
Which is the same way of saying we deserve a second
No,
majority
it's not.
black district.
This is a lawyer. He said, and that is just basically, he basically interpret their words for them as in saying, we want another black district. Not the fact that he didn't think of, we are receiving unfair treatment and we need to find a solution to it. He doesn't want to acknowledge the system that is race-based in the favor of white people.
Oh, they done lost their fucking minds. We need more people talking about this, so please stay with me here because the Supreme Court is trying to overturn one of the most important achievements of the civil rights movement, which was the Voting Rights Act Section 2. And I'm going to tell you more about what this is and why this is so important and why what they're doing is setting a dangerous precedent that will put us back 50 fucking years. And I'm not being dramatic, by the way. So what is Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act? So it is basically to stop racial gerrymandering. So basically what it does is it makes it illegal for you to dilute the vote of another race in a district and not fairly represent it, essentially. For example, 56% of the black population in America is in the South. So if these fucking states are able to do what they're trying to do, this is what the fuck the districts are going to look like when it comes to elections in the South, period. Which is going to make it so the black vote in America isn't going to matter. This is 2020 fucking 5. Now, what is the Supreme Court? How do they affect how all this is going to happen? And what is the case that's even being seen? So we'll start off with the Supreme Court, which is the highest court on the land. And they basically have no fucking buddy to check them, essentially. They decipher things that come to their desk and rule whether or not it's constitutional. If it is constitutional, then it's allowed. If it's not, then it stops. That's the reason why Roe versus Wade was such a huge thing in our country when it came to abortion rights, because they ruled that it was unconstitutional to be able to control a woman's body because that was between her and her medical provider. And then they fucking overturned that shit. And now look at what is happening. They allowed the states to basically determine whether or not somebody can get an abortion. And we already know all the horrible things that have happened as a result of that overturning. But they can overturn shit even if it's been here for 50 years. The Louisiana case, let's talk about it. The reason why this is even making it to the Supreme Court is because Louisiana was sued because they were diluting the black vote. And because of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, that is what actually gave black voters the power to be able to hold Louisiana accountable. And as a result, because Louisiana's population is 1/3 black voters, they had to allow another black congressional district to basically make sure that their vote is actually counting and not being diluted. But now they're trying to say that's unfair. That's essentially what this is. They're trying to say that's unfair, that black people basically shouldn't get anything. That's basically the simplest way to put it. They're basically trying to say they're upset that black people are getting any form of equity because they think it's unfair that this country would actually be a democracy. So basically, they only want the democracy to lie within white people, but everybody else, they shouldn't have a say or a voice or vote in anything in this country. And if you're somebody who claims to like democracy or care about those things, you should be pissed as well about this. Everybody should be pissed about this. And more fucking people should be talking about this, because once this goes through, which it seems like it's going to, that is going to fucking change the rest of your life in this country. I hope you know that, because these Supreme Court justices don't have term limits, meaning those bitches will stay there. And these people were packed in that fucking court by Donald Trump. They are Trump loyalists. They will do whatever he says. And if they're willing to go as far as to do this, we already know they're going to do more shit, because they already have. They already have done more shit. They're going to keep seeing how much the fuck they can get away with. I hope you understand that. And once again, there is nobody to really check the Supreme Court. And that's why this is so fucking dangerous. This, in combination with all the other disgusting things that are happening in this country, such as the ICE raids, such as them trying to cut almost $1 trillion in healthcare so that people are literally not going to be able to afford to go to a doctor. This should outrage you, because this is literally what we've been saying it was. This is the beginning of the end of democracy, period, in America as you fucking know it. When they said they want to make America great again, they really just meant they want to make it racist again. And they just want to control America like they used to and bring us back to a really fucking dark time. Oh my God, I'm so fucking pissed. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I just had to let it out, but I wasn't going to just not use my platform to talk about this. And everybody who can use your voice, spread this, share this, send this to anybody. Let people know what's happening, because this is happening and the ruling has not happened yet. So this is the moment where people should be as loud as they can.
I really hate admitting this, but I am scared as shit, like full of fear type shit, right? Like, I don't know what it's like to fight for civil rights, for human rights. That's always been in history books. I've always read that from like a grateful perspective, of like from a grateful standpoint of like, thank God those battles have already been won so that I'm able to live the life I live and things like that. But then in real time, like, we're already like not responding to ICE the way we should be responding to ICE. Like, they're talking about having meetings about legislation, about forcing them to wear body cameras and having to identify themselves. Y'all are having meetings about forcing federal agents to identify themselves. Force them to without the fucking meeting. We are seeing extremists implement their fucking playbook, and then we're slow walking the fucking response and looking around confused about why it's getting worse. And then in real time, right, we're all so sure that birthright citizenship, they won't overturn that. That's in the Constitution. They're about to overturn the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that arguably allowed black people to vote. Later adjustments in that act extended that to minority languages being included in that Voting Rights Act. So I know that this is just an aim at not letting immigrants vote, shit like that. Like, they'll continue to tack on immigration and Latino people, right? But they're also very aware of how repealing that voting act, the Voting Rights Act, affects the black community, right? And they'll sit there and gaslight you and fucking lie and try to make it seem like this small population of people, this small population of black people, this small minority here is making decisions that affect the majority of the state and the majority of the state isn't happy with that, so it's anti-democratic, right? That's their fucking argument, right? When in reality, the majority of the state is making the vote, obviously, and those votes, or the direction the state heads in, is negative for black communities, for communities of minorities and marginalized groups. So they're saying, hey, we want a fucking voice too, god damn it. And then when they have a voice and they have their places in the districts and the maps and things change according to their voice, the people who didn't want them to have a voice are now looking around at the changes going, oh, fuck no. And so you're seeing gerrymander after gerrymander after gerrymander trying to minimize these black voices. And the most infuriating thing about the Republican Party is their ability to gaslight and mask what they're actually trying to do. Because their actions, you can very easily connect the dots to what the fuck they're trying to do. But then behind that goddamn podium, behind that motherfucking mic, they'll try to gaslight you and make it seem like you're the crazy one. We all know that Republicans are trying to take healthcare away from millions of Americans to give more money to the fucking multi-billionaires, right? They want to call this a democratic attempt at political theater, right? I can list example after example after example, but my fear stems from, one, there are racist and white supremacists all throughout the federal government, especially now. Two, what the fuck is a lifetime appointment, bro? The Supreme Court has shown clear-cut corruption and bias, and we have to deal with this until they go on to the next world. Why do you get to show corruption and bias and keep your position, bro? That question goes for everything in the federal government. Like, what is this? We're literally talking about reversing the Voting Rights Act of 1965, bro. And if they do that, and then all of these white supremacists and racists and people that are too pussy to voice their racism, but definitely are racist, now they can just vote and do shit in the shadows. And then when communities are affected by that negatively, they'll say, you know, this is just what the American people wanted. Can't you see how the majority voted? It's not the majority when you intentionally cut out people's voices. You're only allowing like-minded people to vote. That's why they attack Democrats the way they attack Democrats. And the saddest part is they can't even explain a fucking end goal to you. Like, okay, every Latino is out of the country. Every black person is out of the country or fucking slave. Every blue-eyed, blonde-haired white woman has fucking $1 million and is subservient to her husband who has $5 billion. All this bullshit. Once you get everything your evil mind wants, then what? You think you'll feel satisfied? You think you'll feel fulfilled? No. Evil has a hunger that cannot be fucking satiated. Like, it cannot be filled. Like, it's always going to be hungry. So even if you get everything you currently claim to want and your fucked up mind and your fucked up worldview, once you're in that reality, you're still going to want more, you weird bitch. You can't even fucking adequately explain what your end goal is, how you benefit from it. You just know that it allows you to implement your hatred onto the fucking world, but then you'll turn around and praise God. Get the fuck out of here, bro. So yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared they're going to take away all of the fucking civil rights, human rights we're used to fucking benefiting from. And then we have to take up the mantle and the battle, the real battle, an actual battle of getting that back. Battles for fucking human rights and civil rights and shit like that, the fact that that's a 2025 thing and not just in history books is so wildly fucking pitiful, guys. Like, our response to this bullshit is some of the most pussy shit I've ever seen in my fucking life.
If you're stressed out about the Supreme Court potentially, most likely, gutting the Voting Rights Act, I need you to listen to this, okay? The midterms become so much more important if they end up gutting the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, okay? More than it already was, which was incredibly important already, okay? On Wednesday this week, they had oral arguments. That does not mean they've come to a decision. Typically, the Supreme Court terms are from, like, beginning of October to, like, end of June. They can go into July sometimes, like it did this past year, I believe. But that end of June typically is when they do like their announcement of decisions and stuff like that.
It can vary. There can be times they do decisions, announce them outside of that time period, but typically what it's looking like is that it could be a decision they make after the primary start for the midterms. If that is the case, if that is the case, it would not directly impact the midterms for 2026. That is a good thing if that ends up happening. And what, from my understanding, would be the determining factor on if it would do that is if it happens before or after the primaries. And this is because the Republicans would need the decision to be able to then do the actual redistricting of the maps in order to make them be effective for this election, which they wouldn't have the ability or the time to do that at that point. From what I understand, I'm not a lawyer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure. I wouldn't put it on here if I wasn't like at the least 99% sure. I'm not saying that's for sure going to happen, okay? Because who the fuck knows what's happening at this point? But if that is the case, you have to show, I swear to God, it might be one of, if not the most important election we've ever had. Okay? Right next to neck and neck with last year. Okay? Because this can be the difference between us having voting rights and not. Like, period. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Because like them or not, Democrats are not out here trying to strip your voting rights. Okay? They're not. And before anybody else says it, Prop 50 in California is to counter Texas, where I'm at right now. Okay, that's not the same. We get Democrats in office and take back Congress, we have more of a fighting chance to do something about this. Because like I said, we don't backseat drive this country. Not anymore, not collectively. We're engaging with our politicians. That means when they're in office, they ain't got to be perfect. They got to be pushable. They got to be pushable because we are going to push them to do something to address the issues that are going to come from this potential very likely decision from the Supreme Court. So on top of all the other things that we needed to get them in office for, because of all the stuff that this administration is doing, on top of all of that, there's this added piece, okay? I was very much thinking this was going to be a thing earlier this year. I was interested to hear what the oral arguments were going to look like. Now I'm pretty sure that they're going to gut it, which is extremely sad because that's what we fought for the civil rights movement. But that's a whole nother thing. But I'm telling you, you have to show up for the midterms, and I need you to drag everybody you know with you. Okay, I don't care if you drag them kicking and screaming. I do not fucking care. Show up. Because arguably, you can make the argument that this election is more important than last year's. Please, take this seriously. I'm not a lawyer, but I can pretty comfortably say by the time the earliest primaries start in March, like it does in Texas, it will be too late for states to start trying to redistrict their maps for the midterms. Okay? I'm not a lawyer. If you are, feel free to correct me, but I'm almost positive. So, I need you all to lock the fuck in, okay? Y'all already know I'm finna do it. Now, me right now, as it stands, do I know exactly what the path forward looks like once because I'm naming and claiming it, once we get them in office? Not entirely, no. But we have more of a fighting chance to figure it the fuck out if they're in there. So I need y'all to fucking show up, I swear to God.
Who knew that redistricting in Louisiana would call into question the Voting Rights Act? But that's exactly what happened. The left is arguing that the Supreme Court is trying to dismantle the Voting Rights Act. And maybe that's not a bad thing, because the truth is that law was written for a time when Black Americans were systematically silenced. It made perfect sense in the 1960s. But today, we're living in a different America. Black voters have power. Their voices are loud, proud, and heard, and their votes count. So when Section 2 is now being used to justify carving up maps by race, that's not protecting equality. That's prolonging the division. But somehow, not considering race is now called racist. As Justice Clarence Thomas said, our Constitution sees neither black voters nor white voters. It only sees American voters. And that's the point. You can't keep fighting for equality while refusing to recognize equality when it's already here. Voters for Trump proved that millions of black and Hispanic Americans are shaping outcomes and not being excluded from them. So maybe it's time to stop making everything about race and start making it about America. If you agree, follow and share. If not, I'll see you crying in my comments.
If you've been trying to avoid reading what the Supreme Court might do to the last key component in the Voting Rights Act, I wouldn't blame you because they break everything they touch. Instead, let me summarize. So a group of white voters sued the state because the state has 2 minority-majority districts. And those white voters feel that they were discriminated against because the state considered race when drawing those district lines. So they sued and claimed the district, and really the Voting Rights Act itself, is a violation of the 14th and 15th Amendments. The 14th guaranteeing equal treatment under the law, and the 15th prohibiting the use of race to disqualify someone from voting. Now I know what you're thinking. Yes, it is the most MAGA 2025 thing ever for a group of people who look like me to try to use the Reconstruction Amendment, laws written specifically to address the crimes against humanity committed by the South, make themselves the victims. These people are obviously cut from the same Confederate cloth as our president, because these amendments, they weren't random or arbitrary. They were patches on crimson-soaked holes in the Constitution. But even setting aside historical context, arguments in this case are ridiculous. White voters in Louisiana are obviously not suffering from inequality. Speaker of the House is from Louisiana, and white voters are overrepresented in the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, governor's mansion, the entire judicial branch, the stock market, and tax brackets. In fact, really the only place in society where black people are actually almost well represented is the House of Representatives. And that's because of the Voting Rights Act, because redistricting experts have already calculated that the House of Representatives could lose 15 black members if the Supreme Court strikes this down. Now, these Republicans in Louisiana, they say that it's all about politics and not about race. But that's obviously bullshit. Because it's actually not hard to win the votes of black people. You just have to put forward leaders and policies that don't actively destroy black people's lives. If it were really about politics, they would just have better policies. Because if they had better policies, there wouldn't be such a high correlation between black voters and Democrats. This lawsuit is about race. Because the Voting Rights Act was about race. Because the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were about race. Because the Civil War was about race. These laws are the direct consequences for people, including those living in Louisiana, who chose to fight a war to suppress a race, even if those consequences continue to be inconvenient for rich white men decades later. Because I hate to break it to you, but it was rich white men who were fighting that war in the first place. But back to today, because we still have to deal with today. Well, it looks like the Supreme Court might split this issue, not cut the Voting Rights Act entirely, but make it harder to sue. It doesn't change the fact that this was never a durable solution. Because the real issue here isn't whether black people can vote. They can and they will. And the kinds of tricks they use to get around those amendments, like poll taxes and literacy tests, are still illegal. The issue is gerrymandering, something that is not protected by the Supreme Court or the Constitution. Congress at any time, any year, can step up and ban it. And in fact, we did try to do that exact thing in 2022, but Republicans filibustered and blocked it. Because if they can't cheat, they can't win. So if you want to support the Constitution, if you want to support marginalized people, if you want to render whatever the Supreme Court rules on this case absolutely useless, vote out every single Republican who ever resisted redistricting reform. And maybe, just maybe, we can put behind us this fight that threatens to tear apart the United States at the seams.
I didn't know time machines existed, but apparently they do, because the Supreme Court is about to take us back 60 years. So here's what's going on. There's a case called Louisiana versus PE0PLE. In plain English, it's about whether states can still use the Voting Rights Act to stop racial discrimination in elections. The court is now asking if creating voting districts that help black voters have fair representation is somehow unconstitutional. Think about that. The law that protects against racial discrimination might be ruled as too racial. Can we just not? This all started when Louisiana drew a map with just one black majority district, even though about a third of the state is black. Black voters sued, and they won. Thank God. So the state redrew the map with 2 black districts. Then a group of white voters sued them, saying the map discriminates against white people. Interesting. And now, the Supreme Court, with its conservative majority, will decide if the law that's been protecting voters since 1965 should still even exist anymore. Legal experts say if the court strikes down Section 2, that's the part that stops racial discrimination in voting, states could erase Black and Latino districts completely, and nobody could challenge it. The Trump administration even filed a brief backing that argument. So yeah, maybe time travel is real, because this case is dragging us straight back to a time where people were beaten for trying to vote. Make sure to stay informed and keep an eye on October 15th, because that's when the justices will hear the case. And please, I am begging you, share this with everyone you know. This is way too important to not be heard by everyone, and do not be afraid to speak out. Silence is consent, and the more voices we have, the more power we have.
It looks like the Voting Rights Act of 1965 could be overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States, and I don't think a lot of Black and brown people truly realize what this could mean for us. If this goes through, it just proves what many of us have been saying for years. And also, the Union made a huge mistake by not holding the Southern conservative Confederates fully accountable after the Civil War. They should have never been allowed back into politics. The same forces that fought to keep slavery alive were given power again, and over time they rebuilt their influence through laws, courts, and political systems, and now they've positioned themselves to roll back rights our ancestors bled for. And this isn't just on conservative, this is also failure of liberal leadership. People like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Cory Booker, and Hakeem Jeffries, they had years to codify these protections into law when Democrats had power. Instead of being bold, they played it safe. This is what happens when you compromise with white supremacy instead of confronting it. It festers, it grows, and it comes back to strip everything away that we fought for. This isn't just about weakening voting rights. It's about erasing decades of progress and silencing the voices of Black and brown communities.
I need everybody to pay attention of what's happening at the Supreme Court right now with the Louisiana redistricting case. This is very important. And so we need everybody to pay attention to the potential possibility of gutting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. If you know anything about the Voting Rights Act, that is the act that John Lewis and so many others spilled blood, many fought and died to protect. Well, the Supreme Court stands ready to gut that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So we need everybody to sign the petition and keep a firm eye on this particular case. The case was argued yesterday, and many of the justices appeared ready to end the consideration of race in redistricting of congressional seats. And what that means is we could lose as many as 19 congressional seats that are held by African Americans and people of color. That's important because representation matters. And so I'm going to continue to update you on what's happening, but I need everybody to pay attention. I know there's a lot of things going on in this country right now, but we need to focus on this and what's happening at the Supreme Court level.
Black people were hung in trees, burned, tarred and feathered, shot, imprisoned, exiled for the Voting Rights Act. As soon as you peep their game, they attack. This week, the Supreme Court was back at it, and it looks like we're staring down yet another blow to Black voting power in this country. Imagine that. We are the target. Again. Now, if you know your history, like I know my history, you know that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a major win for the civil rights era. It was meant to protect us from the racist voter suppression tactics that had been the norm for so long. But here's the problem. Over the past decade, this law has been slowly picked apart by the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court has been slowly growing more conservative. And this week, the justices heard a new case that could cut even deeper into our already fragile voting protections. So this all started with the state of Louisiana, which has a Black population of about 30%. After the last census, the state was required to redraw its congressional maps. That's normal. But here's the catch. After a lot of legal back and forth, Louisiana was told it needed to create 2 majority Black districts to fairly represent the state's black voters. Eventually they did. But then out of nowhere, but not out of nowhere, a group of so-called non-black voters jumped in and said, hold up, we've got a problem with that. Mind you, not the black folks, not the legislature, not the court, but this group didn't like the idea of adding a second black majority district. So they took it to court, and now it's in front of the Supreme Court, because that's what happens when white folks get upset. What's wild is that we've been here before. Just 2 years ago, this same court, with Chief Justice John Roberts writing the opinion, upheld a very similar provision of the Voting Rights Act in Alabama. They said, yeah, if black voters are being packed into one district or spread out to dilute their power, that's not okay. That decision gave folks a little bit of hope. But now Roberts is acting like that case doesn't even matter, like it's not exactly the same, like it was a one-off. During arguments, the court's conservative justices made it pretty clear they were leaning towards limiting protections for black voters. Again, Justice Alito tried to argue that chasing partisan advantage isn't the same as using race. But come on now. In places like Louisiana, race and party are so tightly connected, you can't separate the two. Lawyer Nielsen, president of the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund, told the court straight up, we're talking about racially polarized voting that is above 84%. Translation, the vast majority of white voters in Louisiana simply don't vote for black candidates, no matter their party. This ain't just political, it's racial. But they don't want to admit that. And then we had Justice Barry Kavanaugh, the rapist, who cast the deciding vote in that Alabama case 2 years ago, come in talking about how race-based remedies like this shouldn't last forever. You're right, Brett. It should last as long as all of y'all are racist. But Nielsen reminded him, Congress didn't put an expiration date on this part of the Voting Rights Act. And more importantly, the 15th Amendment, the one that bans race-based voting discrimination, that's permanent because y'all can't be trusted. Ain't no sunset clause on that, because y'all have always been racist and you will always be racist. Justice Kagan asked the question that's probably on your mind right now. What happens if the court guts this part of the Voting Rights Act? Nelson didn't hesitate. She said it would be catastrophic, because it would. The reason we even have black congressional representation in the Deep South is because of these protections, people. If they get tossed, the map, literally and figuratively, gets a whole lot worse for black folks. We've got to keep organizing, keep voting, keep fighting in the courts and everywhere else. We've got to keep showing up for each other, even when the system tries to shut us down. Keep your people informed and share this video with anyone who needs the information. This isn't just about maps, it's about power. And we know they don't give it to us. We have to take it by any means necessary. But you need to be educated on how the game is played. You need to be disciplined to play the game to win. And you have to have empathy for your brothers and sisters who don't yet know everything they need to know. I love you, black man. I love you, black woman. Knowledge is power. Power to
the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As in the law that Dr. King lobbied Congress to get passed. Martin Luther King Jr. As in the law that John Lewis and other civil rights protesters were beaten by cops on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, trying to get passed. That law, one of the crown jewels of the civil rights movement and the legislative achievements that it brought forth in this country. That law, a law that was meant to give force to the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which black political activists 100 years earlier fought and lobbied to get passed and ratified. And today the Supreme Court heard an oral argument in a case called Louisiana versus Calais, And I have not listened to the oral argument yet. I'm still catching up on some of the oral arguments from earlier in this sitting. But based on the coverage, it sounds like they're skeptical, and they voted to rehear the case. This is the second year in a row that they're hearing this case. And they explicitly asked the parties to provide briefing on the question of whether or not the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Section 2, as applied in Louisiana, is unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. Racially discriminatory. It is infuriating that these judges, these justices, have the gall to tell the 150 million plus women in this country that they don't want to be tyrannical and rule for some constitutional right to abortion because they don't want to legislate from the bench. They don't want to hand down some ruling that everyone has to follow. Leave it up to the states. Problem solved. Abortion is fixed as an issue. Thank you, Supreme Court. But the Voting Rights Act of 1965, been on the books for over 50 years, an act of Congress. Something, if you took a poll right now, I'm not sure you could find very many Americans who are against voting rights. And if this coverage is right, and they do strike this section of the Voting Rights Act down, then they will be legislating from the bench. They will be ruling by judicial fiat. They will be overriding the will of the people as expressed in our laws in Congress. And these justices have the gall to cloak their constitutional decisions in this rhetoric of history and tradition, and oh, we're going back to the original public meaning. And as Justice Jackson aptly pointed out in an earlier case, her first oral argument ever as a Supreme Court justice, a case called Merrill versus Milligan, the original public meaning, the history and tradition of the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution is that they were meant to remediate the original sin of this country. That is, the institutionalized racism that is built into the fabric of our nation's social and political institutions, and make good on the promise of Reconstruction, a promise that is still yet to be delivered. When Dr. King came to the March on Washington, he talked about these amendments to the Constitution, these amendments that these justices, if they vote to strike down the Voting Rights Act, in this case, will be invoking, will be saying these amendments render this federal law unlawful, unconstitutional. He referenced those amendments in his I Have a Dream speech. And the way that he referenced them, he said, go back and read this. It's all right there. They think we're stupid and that we don't interrogate these ideas, but this stuff is clear. It is in black letter terms. It is our history. And Dr. King says in this speech, America made out a check to the descendants of freed enslaved people. And they said, you're going to have voting rights and you're going to be treated equally. That was a check that in 1963, Dr. King said, had still yet to be cashed. He said, we come here to cash a check when he led his March on Washington. He gave his life and years of work trying to cash that check. And he made marginal advances, but the check still hasn't been cashed. And now the Supreme Court is what, going to bounce the check? Going to rescind it? Going to say, actually, we don't promise you voting rights anymore? It is absolutely outrageous. As if this court and its legacy weren't already record-breaking in terms of the damage they have done to the political and institutional structure of this country. With their bogus judicial policymaking. And, I know it's unpopular, but the court does important work. In a lot of these cases, the 9-0 cases, they're doing important work, and these opinions, they spend time on them, and in many cases, they're well thought out. But some of these opinions, God, it is the few cases, it's this case, it's Dobbs, it's the affirmative action decision, it's the presidential immunity decision. They just make me want to rip my hair out because they are so absurd. And they are such a betrayal of the Constitution, of the court as an institution. And the worst part is, these people believe they are above reproach. When journalists ask them questions, they look down their noses and say, well, you should read the opinions. They want to silence anyone who wants to criticize the court. The Chief Justice in his year-end report last year said, you know, the bar of professional attorneys in America hasn't done enough to stand up for the courts. Hasn't done enough to defend our decisions. Maybe if your decisions weren't indefensible, it wouldn't be so hard for professional organizations like the American Bar Association to defend them. And it's a shame. It's a goddamn shame, because the Supreme Court of the United States has been a force for justice in the past. There have been glimmers of moments in our history where the Supreme Court of the United States has really stepped up to its role in our system of government. And there are rare moments, too, when the Supreme Court has been the driving force of some of our worst impulses. Dred Scott versus Sanford. Korematsu versus United States. And now, just a new case every year, and sometimes multiple a year from this current Supreme Court that are adding to that list. It is horrible, and it's a shame. It's a shame. It's such a shame. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to have more to offer on this once I listen to the arguments and of course once an opinion comes down, but it just makes me so angry and sad for this country and for the court.
There is nothing these people have actually not steal from black people. There is nothing. These people have actually not taken. If you give these people opportunity, in fact, they're not only going to take the voting rights, they will even take every single thing that belongs to you as a black person. Your breath annoys them. The food you eat, the water you take, give them more agony. And these people still keep stealing, still keep looting. It's quite funny how these people just keep doing things without considering people that look like me. Am I quite surprised? I am not. And I know that a lot of black people are not surprised. You know, I keep saying in some of my videos, I said we should expect more. We should even expect the worst. So that when it happens, we've already expected it. It will hurt us. It will bring us down. It will break us into pieces. But because we already expect the worst to happen, we just pick up our pieces of broken heart and move. But this is the catch that a lot of them are not getting. That despite the fact they still have this, their systemic racism, they still have this, their segregation nonsense, they still have certain privileges to some certain people, despite the fact that welfare are not even allocated to the people that actually look like me. Now, do we look like our condition? Do we look like what they are pushing us into? Do we look, do we even resemble what they are planned for us? Did we normally fall into the pit that they've dug for us? No. That is one special thing. And that is one of the amazing part that is freaking them out. And that is why when you see a black person just sitting down, minding his or her own business, these people can just walk up to that black person and ask that person, do you belong to this neighborhood? Because they can't imagine you breathe. Do you belong here? Do you own a house here? Do you own a property? Or why are you walking on that street? Or why do you choose to walk in this particular lane? Oh, this particular lane is not meant for black folks. This is meant for white folks. Why are you in that store? Oh, your presence threatens some of our customers. Your presence makes some of our customers freak it out. Oh, you stole something from me even when you have not even literally touched them. Because why? The grace of God that has been pulling through. Black people, I want you to know that whatsoever actually happened right now should not be a surprise. It should not be. You should even expect the worst to happen, because these people will literally not rest. And that is why I love the fact that a lot of Black people are awakening and they keep speaking, they keep talking, and that is why they are scared. I keep saying it. If the rate at which Black folks are actually talking right now, if the rate at which Black folks are actually opening up, if this was how it was during our forefathers 400, 700 years ago, I bet you these people wouldn't have been anything where they are. They wouldn't have been. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Credit belongs to original creators of every single clips and stitches we have in today's episode. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe, like this video, drop me your comments, and lastly, do not forget to share for every other person to get this good news. Guys, with no further ado, I do like I always say in my videos, I'm going to be saying, I'll see you guys in my next one. For now, bye guys. I love you guys so much. Just let me know what you think in the comment section, because some videos actually piss me off when I'm talking, honestly. It is well.